on this here. Well, maybe Alex and I pondered, what would it look like for a local church to practically help you pay closer attention to Jesus? A couple of weeks ago, that's the whole basis of the book of Hebrews. They're starting to drift. They're starting to think about leaving Jesus behind and going back to the sacrifices in the temple and the rituals. I think you've got that by now. I hope you do. So what I did, Silas is actually, this was not planned here this morning. Actually, the opposite was planned. But Silas is walking in right now with what I wanted to create. And to Silas, as you're coming in, just go ahead and hand one to everybody. And so I can't make you use this. I can't make the way I would use it. I can't make even. But if you don't want it, leave it in your seat and we'll give it to someone else. So the point is, if you're going to pay much closer attention, that's the purpose of the devotions. And if you're not getting them, tell Alex. But the purpose of the devotions and the purpose of this book you're getting is just a little resource to help you pay closer attention, not just during the sermon, but you can go home and you actually can have something to look at. Maybe you wrote something down in the middle of the sermon. I know, it's just a small way, simple way that I thought would help. And so that's what I did. They came in Friday maybe, and so I was going to wait another week, but here we are. And so it may help you in your devotions. You may be able to look back on something later and write in your devotions. But in the mega church world, the pastor has become like a CEO. That's not what I want to be. That's not the intention of the pastor. He is to be a shepherd. My whole job is to have you ready when Jesus returns. That's my whole job. I don't know if you really believe that, in the sense of pastors are helping form Christ in you. I'm just repeating what Paul said. And so pastor's role is to help Jesus be formed in you. And so as the week drags on, the reason we gather on Sundays, one is the apostles gathered early because of the resurrection. And so we gather just to remind you, just Hebrews says, about these things. The week goes by and you drift a little, just a little even maybe. Even the best of us just drift a little, and then we have to be pulled back in, so to speak. So, from the parable Jesus tells, if you don't have the right clothes on, what's he going to do to you? Send you out. He's going to throw you out. And in our world, that just doesn't fit, because in our inclusivity, we want all people to be able to participate in everything, as long as you, I guess, can just say what you want to say. And so I found it amazing this past week that I don't know how many women leaders in the WNBA got together, spent a couple hours in a hotel room, and could not come up with what a woman was. And they run the women's NBA. So that's just amazing to me. It's kind of funny. Well, it ain't kind of funny. It is funny. But we were made, as I said last week, we were made to rule and to reign with Christ. We're going to rule and to reign one day with Him. Humans were made just a little lower than angels. And I didn't lie to you last week. I did not. But I want to tell the whole story this week, just real briefly. So look at that verse right there. Go back. Look at verse. I hate to make you pay attention so quickly into a sermon. But look at verse 7. This is Psalm 8. You made him, talking about humans, you made him for a little while, a little lower than angels. I told you that the text says angels, and the text really does say angels in the Septuagint. Now, what is the Septuagint? Septuagint is the Testament. Does that make sense? Malachi, does that make sense? The Septuagint, the Septuagint is the Greek translation. So if you took the Old Testament in your Bible and just pulled it out and held it on its own, and it was in Greek, that would be called the Septuagint. That is what Jesus would have seen. That's what Jesus would have worked with. That's what the apostles were quoting from. They didn't know Hebrew. They were Greek boys. They were Jewish boys that knew Greek. And so the Hebrew text was floating out here. It's floating here. But they're quoting the Greek. So when this Hebrews writer, when the writer of Hebrews, not a Hebrews writer, when the writer of Hebrews writes this letter and sends it to that house church, it was received in what language? So Greek. And when he quoted Psalm 8 right there, that's Psalm 8. You should write beside verse 7 and 8. That's Psalm 8 that David wrote. Psalm 8, 1,000 years before. It would have been in Greek. And he would have quoted the Septuagint. That's because that's the only thing he knew, Greek. I want to tell you that in Hebrew, in the language Hebrew, in the Old Testament Hebrew, this is what it says. Now hang on. It don't say that humans are special. Should despise the wickedness of murdering the Imago Dei in the womb. And people that tout that and promote that and publish that. And I've got family members in this room, or distant family members of people in this room. There is no excuse for the abortion. None whatsoever. Don't look and say we can kill because so-and-so's life. There's no excuse. Don't let the media tell you that someone a miscarriage and they had, no, that's not what all that is. That's not how it happens. But we were made special. And the Hebrew says this. I'm going to read it as the Hebrew writer would have wrote it. You listening? You made him for a little while lower than God. The Hebrew writing there says Elohim. When you know this about Jews, they don't even like to write the word Elohim. I remember years ago at Southern Western, I'd sit down and talk with Dr. Phipps, and he's got all kind of resources in his office. And they would start to write it, and they would mess it up, and they'd throw it out. And that's how sometimes we have our transcription mistakes. They're not errors in the Bible. They're just someone would kind of mark it out and write a word off in the side note. They were afraid to write God's word because they really thought he was holy, holy, holy. But I want to tell you, in the Hebrew, that says we were made a little lower than God. But by the time the Hebrews book writer, came along, he was reading the Greek, and they're afraid to say the word God, so they changed it to what? And then scholars go, well, that word Elohim can sometimes mean bodies that are lower than God. Okay, fine too. But it means God. So we were made a little lower than angels. God made us to rule and to reign. We'll be kings and priests in the new earth. But sin entered our world. Sin entered the fall of Adam and Eve. You know the story, Genesis 3, and everything to trickle down from there. The Imago Dei has been distorted. Who would think that you could go through the wrist? Just think that you can send something. I don't care what it is. You don't need to know what it is. But you can send something from right there and work on this here. Think about that. That's crazy that we have those medical breakthroughs, yet the very thing that slaves, 6% of men are on that little device. We are capable as being underneath God of some amazing things, but in a split second, I assume people can put two keys in a submarine and both turn them at the same time, and we'll launch a missile and do what? Wipe out half humanity. We are not in control of the world or even our own mind, so to speak, because you can get lost. Let's be honest here. I feel like family almost in this group. I've known a lot of y'all a long time. How many of y'all ever sit down on your phone and say, I'm going to scroll for about 2 minutes, and then when you wake up from that coma that you're in, it's been 10 minutes? Anybody? Come on now. That's what I mean. You sit down and say, I'm going to check it real quick. 18 minutes later, you're like, dog, I got lost in that real quick. I'm going to check one stock, Tim, just one little stock. 20 minutes later, you've been lost. We're not in control of things the way we think. Look at Hebrews 2:9. Look at verse 9. We're lower. Don't quite see it, but look at verse 9. But we see him. We see him. This is the phrase of Hebrews over and over. Look to Jesus. Fix your eyes on Jesus. We see him. Jesus there. You got to wait a little 5 or 8 more words. Namely, Jesus. We see Jesus. You should see Jesus. When suffering comes, you should see Jesus. When death comes, you get a call, your dad's died, and he's laying in the floor of his house. You should go, I see Jesus, because he's greater than what I'm going through right now. You should see Jesus. And when you wonder whether Jesus is worth following, you should see Jesus. So what Hebrews is doing is, he's basically telling us that Jesus is doing something in our lives to get us somewhere. And so let's see if I've got this. All right, whoa, that's a blank screen. Good job, Alex. I told him I wanted to draw a little bit today. I want you to think about God being here, God's presence, Adam and Eve with God, walking in the cool of day with God. Everything's perfect, everything's right. He's God's children. And that image was marred, and so we failed. They didn't fall. They were what? They were cast out of the garden. They were separated from God. You can't be in His presence anymore. Never said I don't love you. I just said my character is I cannot have that near me. And so we're cast. This is kind of like earth, if you want to look at it like that. And then back over the same God. So I could come back up to this, but I'm this as a time. Just a chronological time of redemption. So I could swing it back up here. But I'm not. I'm going to put it. What has been marred? What have we lost here? The Imago Dei has been crossed out, and they've been separated. Angels were involved. Angels were put on, little cherubim were flying around. They were on fire. They said, you can't come near God. You don't get to be near God. And so we're down here on earth, so to speak. We're living our own lives. And what Hebrews is showing us is the whole purpose of the garden is to live with God forever and be in His presence forever. But sin entered our world. Sin entered our world, and God has got to fix that. In some sense, He's a fixer, but it's a fixing that He saw way before time even started. In devotions the other night, we were talking about this as a family. God is outside of time. Your cancer appointment or your appointment next week or needing rehab, God is outside of time. Time doesn't bother Him. That's why, technically, if you remember to pray for someone, great. But if you pray for them, have you ever prayed for somebody and then when you actually contact them, they're like, oh, that appointment's not till tomorrow? It doesn't matter. Outside of time, He's working all the time, not because He's bound by our time, but because He's in control of it all. God doesn't sleep or slumber, and then all of a sudden, He just wakes up maybe, if He was slumbering, and go, oh shoot, Jerry's got an appointment at 9 in the morning. I got to get his eyes fixed before then. There's no time. And so God is outside of time. Sin enters the world. And God's got to get us back on track. He's got to get us, let me phrase it like this. He's got to get us back home. He's got to get us back home. You should be thinking that way as a New Testament believer. This isn't home. He wants to get us home. And so what God did to keep things moving as far as correcting this problem, Jesus entered our suffering. That's on your bulletin. Jesus entered our suffering. Jesus, who was fine. Jesus is outside of our suffering. He comes down into our suffering. He enters into it. He didn't from a distance. He could have stood back and said, hey, let me tell y'all how to fix this problem. He actually enters our suffering. If you've never suffered, you're not going to get much of this sermon. If you don't want to suffer, that would be okay. If you don't think you're going to suffer, you're not going to get much out of this. Jesus enters our suffering. He takes on flesh. That's why it says he was made a little lower than angels for a little while. I can't wait to Christmas. My wife don't have to ask, when is it okay to decorate for fall or Christmas? Let's just get it started. I hate to hear the reason we put corn in the backyard was so we'd have the dead stalks at the end to decorate. But he entered our suffering. And you say, well, I thought no one could live and see me, God said. You cannot see my face, Moses, and live. Think about that. It's not just you can't see my face, like, sorry, you can't see. It's you can't see me and live. You don't, is this the garden? You can't be in my presence and lock eyes with me and live. Adam and Eve, you can't walk in the cool of the day like we're buddies and live. You can't do that. So I've cast you out of my presence, and Jesus says, hey, I've come, I've entered your world. My goodness, if you read, Genesis seems like the longest book forever. There's so many names and so many things that happen. But just think of all the sin that goes on in Genesis. I'm not even reading Genesis right now. But you could raise your hand now and just murder, lying, deception, stealing birthrights. I mean, just stuff. You just Genesis go, wow, we are a wicked group of people. And so ultimately Jesus comes and lives amongst us. And he does what? Look at verse 9. We see him who was made lower than the angels, namely Jesus, crowned with glory and honor because of the suffering of death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. Honestly, I got on Amazon this week, and I guess running a business, Deb knows I'm very financially conscious with most things. I've waited 12 or 14 years to buy a sign for my office, and we're probably to the daughter. But on Amazon this week, and I thought, I'm going to get everybody a wooden spoon that you sample ice cream with. You know what I'm talking about, them little wooden spoons. And I got on Amazon, and it just fell through the cracks. And you say, what in the world's that about? And when you came in, I was just going to hand you a wooden spoon. And I wanted this point. This ain't from TikTok or anything. I just thought, go back and look at that. So that by the grace of God, he might taste death. Because some people think Jesus just kind of stuck his toes in it, or he sampled it. He didn't sample death, friends. He died on an old rugged cross, strung out there, spear in the side, crown of thorns from the garden on his head, blood gushing out everywhere, agony, sweat. And he tasted death for everyone. He didn't sample it, he tasted it. And that is part of the suffering. I want to remind you that Jesus knows what it's like to be rejected. You think what that means. Who rejected him? Jesus knows what it's like to be misunderstood. Jesus knows what it's like to be betrayed. Think about that. Jesus knows what it's like to be exhausted and sorrowful and lose a mom. Don't forget, he was so fully human, he had a mom that he cared for. Enough where on the cross, one of his last thoughts was, hey, John, take care of my mom. So when you lose a mom and a dad, don't think that Jesus hasn't been there. He knows through. It's so hard to pray through this problem I've got. He knows what it's like, and he knows what it's like to die. Jesus does not sit back in your life and say, hey, I know about suffering, I've read about it. Because there's a lot that I've read about that I've never experienced. Because and so back on track, he picks a man before the foundation of the Trinity is selected to come, and he's a down-to-earth, muddy, muscle, flesh, bones, dirt under the fingernails kind of guy. And he takes on the flesh of mankind, and he walks and he talks with his buddies. He hangs out with them. I'm assuming he did. He was a kid. He had to have played Jewish games. He did all of that. He was so normally human that his friends around him said, isn't that Mary and Joseph's son? There's no way he's preaching and talking like that. This is just a regular old boy. I was going to say that, forgot his backpack at school. I don't know if that's fair to say. I don't know if he forgot anything. But he was fully human. He's always been God to rescue a master of sin. And look, it says there in verse 9, but we see him. I want to ask you something this morning. How do you see Jesus? How do you see him? This right here always blows my mind. I love the Old Testament. I love it when the New Testament authors reach into the Old Testament. Jesus said this to the Pharisees, your father Abraham rejoiced. Now, you think about this. Bring your brains to church. Your father Abraham, he's been dead a couple thousand years. He rejoiced that he would see my day. And Jesus don't kind of knew out there less. He saw it and was glad. Could see Jesus 2,000 years down the road because he had spiritual eyes. So when he raised that knife to kill Isaac, what did he really see right there? You thought about that? Because he raised the knife. I'm telling you right now, there's times I might have wanted to kill the kids. Come down to somebody telling me to kill them. All in the name of show me your devotion to me. Abraham raised the knife and was willing. I'm not assuming, that's what Paul teaches. He saw, this is John, Paul says, same thing. Abraham believed in the resurrection. Silas, if you go out right here, my God is so good and my God is so great and my God is so powerful, son, he'll bring you back to life. Dad, that's never been done. Yeah, I know it hasn't. But that's the kind of God we serve. No one's ever raised from the dead, but that's what he can do, and that's who he is. And so we see Jesus. Forget that. Forget faith. You come in here tomorrow or next Sunday and say, hey, by the way, preacher, I saw Jesus this past week. I'll call wherever we need to call and get you checked out. You see him by faith. Now, let's move on to verse 10. All that was for free. Slow down and read this with me. For it was fitting. So he said, we see Jesus. He's tasted death for everyone. For, so he's elaborating on the for. It was fitting that he, you need to ask yourself who that is, for whom and by whom all things exist. I'll just go ahead and tell you, that's God. Okay? For it was fitting that he, for whom and by whom all things exist, in bringing many sons to glory, should make, it's fitting, so he just always parenthetically putting stuff, for it was fitting that he should make the founder, if you're hungry, you're reading flounder there, don't, it's founder, make the founder of their salvation perfect through suffering. For it is fitting that he, remember he just said he suffered and died and bled and died and he was bruised and died. He tasted death for everyone. And somebody may raise an objection and go, well, you mean God killed his own son? And he says, for it was fitting that he should make the founder, God should make the founder of their salvation perfect through suffering. Now, what are we doing? Remember the big. We've got God in His presence. We have failed, and God is trying to get us back. What is with God? God's glory, God's image. You were made in that image. Sin marred the image. We have fallen. Jesus has entered into our suffering. He's died. He tasted death for everyone. So the cross is here, conquering sin. And Jesus, if you go back to verse 10, right there, I'm going to go ahead and give away my last, we'll come back to it. It was fitting that in bringing many sons to glory. I'm going to go ahead and that's the whole point of the gospel, is to get sons and daughters back to glory. It's fitting that he would, in getting them back to glory, something's got to happen. We'll talk about that. But I want you to see the big picture. The glory that we had with God. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory. The image is marred. You were made a little lower than God. And that image has been tainted. And until you're born again, that first thought in your mind is me, me, me. And so the first thought with Adam and Eve before sin was God, God, God. And so we have fallen, and Jesus has entered, and He's trying to get many sons and daughters to glory. He's bringing us to glory. That's the whole gospel. He has basically, like this, God has lost. Don't think lost, He don't know where we are. But He's lost His sons and daughters. He had to kick us out of the garden. He's lost His sons and daughters. And so He's got to get the got to get the original plan back on track. And so it is fitting, He's saying. Now what does this mean? It was fitting. You should write beside that right. R-I-G-H-T. It was right. It was consistent with God's character is what that means. This wasn't just a weird plan God come up with. This made sense to a God for whom and by whom all things exist. Everything's for God. Everything was made by Him, for Him, and through Him. Hebrews 1 talks about that with Jesus. So He's saying it was right. What's right? Don't read this and think, that just doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense. A God who lost His children in the garden has come down to rescue those children. That makes perfect sense. And that God wants to bring them back home so they can live with Him and sit on His throne and worship Him and rule and reign and judge the angels, Paul said. So it's right. In bringing many sons to glory, here's the crux of the message. It was right that He should make the founder, That's Jesus. You need to, if you don't know that yet, now you do. He should make the founder of their salvation perfect through suffering. Let me read that out. That in For it was fitting that in trying to get sons and daughters back home, God made Jesus, the founder, the pioneer of their salvation, made him suffer. He made Jesus suffer. And why? Jesus was perfected through this suffering. Jesus was perfected through suffering. Now, you should raise an objection right because we have the same word for perfection. That word there, that word for verse 10, the founder of their salvation, Jesus was sinless, and you'd be right. He never sinned. He was morally perfect. You're right. What this is getting at is, it's speaking about bringing something to completion. It means qualifying some. When I say my wife is the perfect one for our home in the kitchen, I mean she's qualified. She was raised by someone who cooked all the time. Do you see what I'm saying? No one's making a moral assumption about Rhonda's heart. What we're saying is Jesus was perfected. He was completed. He was matured because of the suffering he had to go through. That's what this means. He was perfected. He was fit for the job. None of you want to work for someone that, really and truly, none of you want to work for someone that comes right out of college with a 4-year degree, and now he's in charge of people that have been doing it 20 years, and all he knows is a textbook, and he doesn't know about the nuts and bolts and on the ground how to get it done. And Jesus is the kind of guy that's been on the ground, he's done it, and therefore, he's the right representative. He experienced the full pathway of obedience. He obeyed the Father when it was costly. He trusted the Father when it meant suffering. He remained faithful when it led him to a cross. So the writer of Hebrews isn't saying that Jesus was morally imperfect and suffering fixed him. He's saying he was already perfect, but suffering completed the mission. The pioneer would lead us to glory because he's fully suffered. Look at this. We don't have a high priest who's unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. That's the same writer. I just want you to know the same writer's saying he's sinless. So don't think he's saying he was made perfect. Here's what we need to know. Although he learned obedience. I thought Jesus was the smartest guy around. He was. I thought Jesus knew everything because he was God. He is. But what this means is he learned obedience. He experientially went through obedience. There's a difference between knowing it intellectually. You know this. There's a difference between knowing it intellectually and experiencing it personally. Jesus knew what obedience was, but he experienced obedience when obedience cost him something. Now let's think about it just a second. What did it cost him? Obedience meant hunger in the wilderness. It meant rejection by friends. It meant betrayal. It meant Gethsemane. It meant the cross. Jesus' obedience was tested in the furnace of suffering, and he remained faithful. Suffering will always put obedience to the test. That's what it's designed to do. Jesus' obedience wasn't theoretical, it was tested. And being found in human form, he humbled himself. Jesus could have raised his hand and said, hold up, God, I'm God. But he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death. You know Easter. You know the story. You know the sweat that looked like blood, apparently. If there's a way this cup of wrath that you're pouring out on me can pass by, from my human perspective, God, just do it. Let it go. But he became obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. So what I'm saying is, he didn't merely say, Father, I obey you. He demonstrated all the way to death. And that's what makes him qualified to be the founder or the pioneer. He's walked the road. So, our captain suffered, we will too. Now that's the message that the church usually doesn't want to hear. Now let me back up. Let me back up just a second. I think there's some imagery we need to flesh out on this word founder. This word founder can mean, this word for founder, archegos, can mean founder. He started it all. You all know what the founder is. It also means a pioneer. You should write that down because I like that one. It's the pioneer. He's the trailblazer. He went before us. But the one I really like is the one I use from the next point. It's captain. He's the captain. He's in charge. He descended to earth and he says, hey, all these humans coming along behind me, they're mine if you're found in him. Not all people are God's children. He went before us. He suffered. He bled thorns and whips. He died. He paid the penalty. And God says it's fitting and right for him to suffer. The captain has gone ahead. He's the captain. I love that. Now, the word captain also, these Greek people, I found this out. The Greeks then probably would have, this is the same word used in Greek mythology for someone like Hercules. Actually, I'd forgotten my Greek mythology apparently because Hercules fights death. And when I saw that, I was wondering if the writer pulled that same word out for captain because Hercules fought death. You get the connection with Jesus. But he really won. So, our captain is out on the road. He's walking the road. He's endured suffering. He's not, listen, Jesus is not at the finish line saying, come on. Some of you are closer to the finish line than I am, just pure age. But he's not at the finish line saying, hey, try to make it. He's out in front. He's already walked the road of suffering. He's walked through death. He's entered glory. And so glory, we don't glorify pain for pain's sake. If you came to me and said, I love pain, I'm going to check you in again. Something's not right. We don't love pain. But listen, Christians don't pretend that suffering doesn't hurt. Jesus himself wept at the grave. You know that. He asked the Father if the cup could pass. He cried out in anguish. So listen, don't tell your friends real Christians don't hurt. Tell your friends Christians hurt and can still trust God. And so because our suffering was done by our captain, we're no better than the captain. I mean, I'm being honest. We sit around. Sometimes I wonder why I'm not suffering more. Honestly, like, Lord, this is the plan. This is your design for us to suffer. And you go, man, you're off your rocker. No, it's a design to conform you to Jesus. He learned obedience. You ask your older saints and ask them when they felt the closest to God. It wasn't when life was easy. So suffering is a part of the plan. Look at this. And if children, if you call yourself a son or daughter of God, then heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ. You want Jesus to be your brother. That's next week. This is your brother. You only get to claim that provided we suffer with him in order that we may also be glorified with him. You want all the benefits of glory in heaven and being with God? You're going to suffer. It's just a fact of life. You're going to suffer. But if you suffer, take great encouragement. You're going to be glorified with him. Our captain's gone before us. This is why the New Testament writers talk like this. Look at this. Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you. Don't be surprised if the county comes and shuts us down. Just being honest. Don't be surprised if you come home and there's graffiti on the side of your house because you went and marched with some protesters at an abortion clinic and the front of it says abortion hater. Don't be surprised at that. We want to be friends with everybody. Peter doesn't say if suffering comes, something must have gone wrong. He says don't be surprised. We follow a suffering Savior. Then Jesus told his disciples, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. You want to suffer? Come follow me. Because I know where I'm going. I'm headed straight to the cross. And if you want to be with me, you got to come with me. This is why Paul talks like this. For this light, momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory. It's just light moment. I remember texting after my dad passed, somebody said, the typical, things they text to you and say and all that. And I text this verse back to him. Right? I just said, I assume this is a light, momentary affliction. For me, there's no more of that than my dad. The Christian life is not simply Jesus suffered in my place so I don't have to. You don't read that anywhere in the New Testament. It's Jesus suffered, and as I follow him, I should expect that suffering will sometimes be part of the path that he walks with me. He will walk with you on that path. You all know Romans 8. I don't know if we put it on there or not. We didn't. Look at this. And after you have suffered a little while. I hate expiration dates. My wife's got me so raised now that after 25 years, you pull anything out of the refrigerator, the first thing you do is you check the expiration date. And if it's 2 minutes past it, you throw it away. We don't always get that right, but there's no expiration date on this. Glory, this has an expiration date. You've suffered a little while. It don't go on forever, my friend. The God of all grace who has called you eternal. You see that? I wrote God and glory, and he's getting us home to glory. Peter says, the God who's called you to eternal glory will himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. It won't last forever. It can't last forever. He's actually making everything work out for us so that one day we'll look more and more like Jesus. This is how I think a lot of people interpret suffering. If you've said it, it's okay. Don't beat yourself up. Just don't say it ever again. Just sentence. Say it out loud if you really want to try. If God loved me, finish the sentence, somebody. If God loved me, he wouldn't, hey, let's say it, Joseph, louder. He wouldn't allow me to suffer. If God loved me, he wouldn't let this happen. There's no way. To be fair, if God loved Jesus, he wouldn't let him suffer. And you'd be wrong. Friend, we're going to suffer. But frame now, the Father said, this is my beloved Son. Let's send him to the cross. Sometimes the very thing we're tempted to interpret as God's absence may actually be occurring inside of God's loving purpose. And let me add this. That doesn't mean every suffering has an explanation. You can't explain everything. But you can explain the character of God who walks with you through these trials. And I know these young boys in here, 5 of them right now, under 20, they can't explain suffering the way you can. They've not had their heart break for the most part. But you have. You've walked through diagnoses. You've walked through kids that have been wandering or have left and haven't called. Don't call. But you got to cling to the character of the one who's walking with you. I'm going to wrap this up. I got to get to point 4. Glory, not suffering, is the end of the story. Glory is the end of the story. Don't think for a second Jesus has left the road. He is on the road with you. He knows every turn. He knows every valley. He knows where it leads. He's not asking you to walk somewhere He's never walked. He went first. He was perfected through suffering. He's the pioneer. He's the trailblazer. He went straight back into God's presence, and you get to come along too if you belong to Him. Look at look at verse 10 again. It was fitting that for whom and by whom all things exist, in bringing many sons to glory. You actually can, in your Bible, that word for sons, I'm not trying to be inclusive here because there are some translations that just do it to do it, but that word actually can mean, or does mean, sons and daughters. In bringing many sons and daughters to glory. Now don't rush past this word right here. In bringing many sons and daughters to glory. This is why salvation, friend, is not primarily a past experience. The New Testament's always looking forward to glory. It's a past. I was saved. I'm being saved. I will be saved. Salvation is all 3 tenses. Don't rush past that. Jesus, listen, no mention of hell in this. Jesus isn't merely rescuing people from hell. Oh my goodness, there's so much more than a ticket out of hell. And if that's all you have, you probably don't have it. The point is, He's rescuing people and not leaving them to wander through all the way to eternity. He's bringing His people to glory. And I got to tell you something that I saw this week, okay? So you're going to have to hang around. Because this right here, Luke chapter 10, this is... Everybody knows this. Everybody knows this. I know that. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was. Talking about the man that had been robbed. And when he saw him, he had compassion. Well, you going to tie this to Hebrews? Hang on. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his own animal, and he brought him to an inn. The Greek verb here in verse 10, he's bringing people to glory, is the same word in this. He's bringing him or brought him to the inn. The Samaritan finds this man helpless, hopeless, beaten, broken. And he doesn't merely say, here's the way to the inn. Good luck. He takes responsibility for getting there, and Jesus is doing the same for you. Jesus, many glory, gone ahead. He's the pioneer, he's the captain, he's the trailblazer, he's the founder, and he's grabbed up his sons and daughters, and he's not just kind of letting them fall out of, he's bringing them. He doesn't just point you to glory, he brings you. The Samaritan puts the wounded man on the animal and took him to the inn. Jesus picks you up in your fallen, suffering, helpless state, and He leads you all the way to glory. You don't walk this alone. Jesus is with you. Very personal here. Some of you may feel like the man lying beside the road. You've been beaten, you've been wounded, you've been unable to get up. But Hebrews 2 says that Jesus isn't standing at the destination shouting directions. Hey, I'm over here, just come on. Down the road, He binds up your wounded heart. He finds you in. The Samaritan provided temporary care. Jesus provides eternal salvation. The Samaritan brought a wounded stranger to the inn. Jesus is listen, stranger. He did all of that, which is the point of the whole. He did that for a stranger. What will Jesus do for His brothers and sisters? He's the pioneer. He rose, we died, we'll die unless He returns first. He entered glory, and this should be your perspective. Paul says, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed." What is that? Why would Paul, under the threat of having his head cut off, still insist, I want to go to Caesar? Because he knew that simply going to heaven probably wasn't the right idea. There's a glory that's going to be revealed, and you can't imagine what it will look like, be like. But he knew who was there. God was there. God is restoring His creation. We will be resurrected. We will live with Christ. We will reign with Christ. We will see Him face to face. Death will be gone. Sin will be gone. Suffering will be gone. The curse will be gone. We will have finally experienced the purpose for that humanity was created for back in. We will be a little lower than God because Jesus, the perfect human, has come. He's been crowned with glory and honor, and now He's bringing many sons to glory. Now, maybe you're sitting here this morning. You're tired. Frankly, you're walking through stuff that nobody else understands. You've walked through stuff that your body hurts. Your marriage is hurting. You've buried someone you love. You keep praying for a child. You're watching someone you love walk away from Jesus. Maybe you're exhausted from trying to remain faithful. Hebrews doesn't tell you your suffering isn't real. Hebrews says look to Jesus. He knows suffering, He knows weakness, He knows death, and your Savior has already entered glory. So friend, let me encourage you as we close. Do not interpret your present suffering as evidence that God has abandoned you. Sometimes the road to glory runs through suffering. This light, momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal way of glory. So when suffering comes, get your eyes off of the suffering and look at Jesus. When the road gets hard, don't assume you've gotten off the path. You may have sinned. I didn't say don't analyze your life. Don't assume you've gotten off the path. When you can't understand what God is doing, trust the one who's walked the road ahead of you. Because Jesus isn't merely waiting at the end. He's leading you down that road. Let us pray together.